So you will notice that it brings you to the very same place. So either way, whether you want to use our website or the Environmental Finance Center Network website, it will take you to the same place. So feel free to use either way to access the tool. When you get there, you will actually have a couple of choices of accessing the Asset Management IQ online, which we'll go over in a minute, or accessing it in written format where there's a printable PDF. So just a little bit about why we developed this Asset Management IQ tool. We wanted to provide a baseline before you begin your asset management activities. So before you really go full scale in developing a program, we wanted you to kind of know where you were at, where your system was kind of located in terms of activity, to give you a place that you were starting from, so that later on you could figure out what progress you've made by doing the tool again. So the first reason was to kind of give you a baseline of your asset management practice before you start. And you will notice that even if you haven't done formal asset management per se, you do many things related to asset management. So it was also to give you an idea of what you're already doing today that impacts asset management. Another reason we did it was to help you identify strengths and weaknesses in your current program, or as you go through your asset management program, to allow you to see what the strengths and weaknesses are later on. This can also help you in choosing a starting point, because you may choose to start with the strengths that you have and build on those, or you may choose to start with the weaknesses where you have more opportunity for improvement with less resources and in a quicker time frame. So you can either start with what you're strong and build from there and build confidence, or you can start with where you're weaker and build up from there. We wanted to have a tool that would be able to assess your progress in a given activity or overall. So again, the tool, if you take it at various points, like maybe you do it once a year, or you do it every 6 months, or you do it after you've implemented some big programs for a while, you can see what your scores are later, compare them to the scores you had before, and that will give you an idea of how much progress you've made in a given area or how much progress you've made overall. And then finally, we wanted to have a tool that would help state funders or regulators with having a means to assess what asset management practice was at a given utility. Because it's hard for a regulator or a funder when they're giving you bonus points or incentives to do asset management, it might be hard for them to know whether you're doing asset management or not, or what you're doing in that regard. So this tool was also meant to be sort of a help for them to kind of get a feel for what activities they would like a system to do in asset management. At this point, I would like to acknowledge the Kansas Department of Public Health and Environment because they were gracious enough to allow us to make this tool available for free. They funded the development of the tool as part of our AM Can Work guidebook. And it is included in that guidebook, but we've made it independently available as well. And I would just like to thank them and acknowledge them for being willing to fund this and for allowing us to make it available to everyone else. So the AMIQ itself is a series of 30 questions divided into 6 different sections, and you can see on the right-hand side section 1 through 6. Section 1 is a general set of questions about asset management. And then sections 2 through 6 refer to the 5 core components of asset management. So section 2 relates to the current state of the assets, section 3 level of service, section 4 criticality, section 5 life cycle costing, and section 6 is long-term funding. So let's open up one of the sections so you can get, actually I'm sorry, I want to do one more thing. I just wanted to bring up that there is a way to do a printable PDF if you don't want to do the online version, or if you want to use it in a different kind of setting. You can download this printable PDF that should now be showing on your screen. Just print this off, and then instead of doing it online, you would just circle the answer that you want, and you could keep the paper version of the Asset Management IQ rather than doing the online version. So that's an option if you would like to bring it to a meeting or you would like to do it in a way that is not on the computer. We do recommend if you do this, put the date at the top of the paper and put the name of whoever filled out the Asset Management IQ just for your records. So let's go back to the electronic version. We'll open up section 1. And every section looks similar with a question at the top. And again, there's five questions for each section. So the question at the top, and then there's 6 responses. The first response is always a 0-point answer, and the final response is always a 5-point answer. So the 0-point answer is if you're not doing anything in that particular area, you'll pick 0. The 5-point answer is you're kind of doing the best practice for that particular area. Doesn't mean you can't improve beyond that, but you're already at a level that we feel like is pretty good practice in that area, and you've kind of gotten where you needed to go. The points 1 through 4 kind of are between those extremes. You're doing a little bit or you're doing a lot in that particular area. We would suggest that you answer the questions as honestly as possible. You want to know what your current practice is. This is really a tool meant for you to assess your own utility. So please be brutally honest with yourself as you're answering the questions. Don't just go through picking 5s for every answer knowing that that's ultimately where you want to be, because it won't really help you assess where you are. And especially at the beginning, if you give yourself artificially high scores, it's going to be harder to actually see the progress going forward. In a small community, 1 or 2 people might know the answers to all the questions. In a larger community, it might take more people. In particular, questions in section 6 that relate to finance may require a few more folks to answer because you might not know all the details about the rates and finances of your system. So let's take a look at a couple of questions just to give you an idea of what we're talking about. So question 1, is asset management terminology understood throughout the organization? So the 0 point is no one in the organization understands the terminology. You don't have any knowledge of asset management, so that would be a 0. If one person understands that and they've gone through training and you know what some of the concepts and terminology, that can be a point. If less than half of the people, in other words, just a few key people understand, that would be a 2-point answer. If more than 50% understand it, that's a 3-point answer. If all, and we've referenced all, meaning that greater than 90% of the organization's personnel understand the terminology. And finally, our 5-point answer is throughout the entire organization, people would be able to state what asset management is, understand the asset management concepts and terminology. So let's say you've had 1 person attend training, you would give yourself a 1. You would do likewise with all of these questions. I'm just going to put a few answers in just so we can see the results without really going through each of the questions. At the bottom of each section, you'll get a score for the section, and the score is always out of 30. So in this case, I got 12 points out of 30, and then it will give me a cumulative score. So if I want to move on to the next section, I can go to section 2. Or I can use down at the bottom, I can just hit the next page. So either way will take me to the next section. And again, I'm just going to click through some answers just so you can see what it's like to get results. In this case, I got an 11, 23. Let's go next to section 3. This would be the section on level of service. So we'll give ourselves some points for these questions, again, just so you can get an idea of what this looks like as you start putting answers in. If you were doing this yourself, we have done this with many utilities and timed how long it takes for the typical utility to get through. And it's usually about a 25-minute process to 45 minutes, depending on how familiar you are with the asset management that's going on in your utility. So the more familiar you are, maybe the less time it will take you, and the less familiar you are, maybe the more time it would take you. Or if you need to ask somebody else in your organization, you know, maybe it takes you a couple extra minutes. And as you might have noticed, if you decide to change your answer, it's no problem. You just click a different answer and it will adjust the score. So you can see the score at the bottom adjusting as I change my answers if I've chosen the incorrect answer. We're on section 6 now. So this is financial questions, and as again what I mentioned is you may have a need to ask somebody else the financial questions. If you're an operator or a manager, maybe you don't have all that information at your fingertips. When you get to the end, there's a results page. The results page will have the scores for each section as well as my cumulative score. My score is out of 130, so I have 80 points out of 130. And then you can enter your name. So I will put in Heather and let it fill in my name. And my utility is A, B, C, D, E, water. And then you can print it, letter or portrait, whichever you prefer, and then click Download Results PDF. And we highly recommend that anytime you do this, make sure you print out the results, and you will note here that the date is automatically put on your results so you know the day that you completed this work. Please note that it is not stored online. It is not stored on our server or anybody else's server, so if you don't download the PDF and you just close the window, you will lose your results. So please make sure if you take the time to actually go through the survey that you do download the results and get the printed PDF. It also prints out all of the individual questions so that you'll have a chance to see what your results are. You can either save this electronically, you know, as a PDF on your computer, or you can print it out, whichever you prefer, or you can do both. Again, we really highly recommend you print it out and save it or store it on your computer because it won't be there later on. You don't need to worry that your score would be 0 because that is not going to be the case for any utility. Every utility is doing some things related to general asset management or current state of the assets, even though maybe you haven't thought about it that way. You're all doing something. So the scores won't be 0. So you don't have to worry. That's a common concern that I've heard is, you know, what if we score 0? You know, how bad would that be? Again, don't worry about it because you won't score 0. You might have a lower score when you first start out, but that's okay. It just means there's a lot of room to get improvements relatively quickly. The higher your scores are, it's actually more effort to get incremental changes. The lower your scores are, you can actually have changes more quickly. So it's okay if your scores are low. It just means that you have more opportunities for benefits and to achieve things from doing an asset management program. It's extremely important for you to measure the success of your program because you'll want to see that doing asset management has had a benefit for your utility, because that's the way you get support from your upper management and the way you get financing to be able to do more asset management activities. This tool is one way to help you measure success of your program, and by looking at the score improvement overall per section or even per question, from one year to the next or one time period to the next, you can measure those improvements that you've had. Also, it can be really hard to see your own improvement. You're kind of in the day-to-day grind of doing work, and so it might be difficult for you to actually measure your own progress or see how far you've come. Having that baseline before you start and comparing it to where you are now will actually be able to help you figure out that yes, you have made progress, you've come a long way. You know, maybe that first question we talked about, nobody understood asset management, you know, when we first started, but now a year later, half the people know it. And that's just one measure of how embedded asset management is in your organization. By looking at who can speak the terminology, that helps us know how embedded the process is. Excuse me. I also want to mention that the American Waterworks Association is in the process right now of finalizing an asset management practice survey that will be going out very soon. It was based off this asset management IQ process, and it's a series of questions approximately the same length of this IQ process that again goes through the 6 different kinds of questions, general questions, and then each of the 5 core components. And we're trying to assess what the current practice is and strengths and weaknesses across the entire country so that that will help us figure out resources that can be provided in the future. You know, what kind of tools do people need? So if you would like to participate in that process, we would greatly appreciate it. The more responses, the better we are. So when the announcement is finalized from the American Waterworks Association, we'll make sure to get the link out to everybody, and if you would like to take that survey, again, please do so because it will be very helpful to know the status of asset management progress across the country. At this point, we're going to switch gears and talk about tools that can be used in other areas, primarily the asset inventory process, but we do have a few other tools that Dawn is going to talk about. What I wanted to mention is the tools that are specific to the asset inventory. We're going to talk about a database and a spreadsheet. These are just starting points. You may ultimately want to have a more sophisticated program. There are many, many, many asset management programs on the market. There are anything from free programs that are available from EPA, such as the Checkup Program for Small Systems, all the way up to programs that are quite expensive, and there's everything in between. So you're going to be able to find a program that does what you want. But the most important thing is you need to be really clear about what exactly you want an asset management or asset inventory program to do for you. What information do you want to be able to put into it? What information do you want to be able to get out of it? What level of technology are you comfortable with? Do you want it tied to a GIS program or not? What price can you afford to pay? Would you be needing training if you bought a particular program, or would you be able to do it on your own? Before you do an investment of money into a program, you really want to have a very good handle on those items of what you want it to do. So sometimes it's better to start with a simpler technology initially while you're getting your feet wet in terms of what information you want, and then maybe move to a program later on. Most of the time, something like an Excel spreadsheet or an Access database can be migrated into a program that you will purchase, or the CUPS program, you can use an Excel-based approach to get data into there. So sometimes, you know, starting simpler and then working up to what you want a program to do will be a little bit better for you.